Okay, good morning all of you. Any questions from last class? Any questions from last class or from assignments? Okay, so let's proceed further. And please note that whatever so far we covered and whatever assignments that were given, Friday I sent these assignments. Assignment 3, okay, and you can make use of numerical integration concepts, whatever we learned, and then solve all these problems. Assignment 3. And here for first problem, this is the Gaussian quadrature. So you need to use Gauss Legendre rule. Depending on the number of points that you select corresponding integration points, locations, as well as weights. And that is how you need to proceed for this problem 1. And problem 2 is for you to practice Gauss-Liguori. The rule, whatever material that I shared with you for different number of points, what are the weights and locations, they are all given. So making use of that, you can complete this one. And this is a extension of Gaussian quadrature for 2 dimensions. And here, if you see, there are some 6 sub-problems here. And some of the problems, the limits of integrations are from -1 to 1. For the problems like this one, where the limits of integrations are not from -1 to 1, you need to first change the limits of integration, okay, and then proceed. So that is applicable for all these problems C, D, E, F. And then fourth one is about integration over triangular domain. I told you these limits 0 to 1 minus t, 0 to 1. These kind of limits are going to represent a right angle triangle. So how it is representing, we'll see, or we'll discuss later when we go for 2-dimensional problems. Meanwhile, what you can do is making use of the material that is shared with you. In that you can see if you want to use for this kind of integration over a triangular domain for different number of points, what are the locations and what are the weights, that information is given. So making use of that, you can complete this problem, okay. So that is how you can complete your assignment 3. The next one is assignment 4. Assignment 4, whatever the background that is required for solving here, the problems here from problem 1 to 10. Any issues there?
Sir, you are not sharing your screen.
Sir, you are.
Okay, sorry. That you could have alerted me much before. I don't know why. Anyway, I'm talking about this assignment 3. Okay, assignment 3, problem 1. This is direct application of Gaussian quadrature. And only thing is, wherever limits of integrations are not from -1 to 1, you need to use change of limits of integration and make the limits of integration from -1 to 1. Okay. You need to do that first before you select your integration points and weights from the table that is shared with you. Or I told you already, some of you are making use of MATLAB software, okay, or some other Mathematica. You can go to MATLAB and then get the weights and coordinates for different number of Gauss points. And please note that in MATLAB or any software, there is a kind of something like a precision. whether you need single precision or double precision, okay, depending on whether how many significant digits you require after the decimal. That actually is going to make a difference in your calculation. So if you want more number of significant digits after 0, then you need to use double precision. Similarly, just one second. So what I'm pointing out is this one. Here, 4 significant digits are there. 8 significant digits are there after the decimal. If you want more significant digits, then you can go to MATLAB and get that. And in many of these, up to 16 significant digits are also you can find in some of the printed materials, like in textbooks and other things. Okay. So why so many significant digits are required? Because please note that in civil engineering, when we work with the size of the structures and other things that we work with are going to be huge. So this significant digits are not going to make any difference for us in our civil engineering calculations. But when you look at the stresses and strains that are going to be developed, in that case, this precision is very, very important. Okay. So how many significant digits that you select, it is going to have effect on your accuracy of the results. So anyway, the point I want to make is use as many significant digits as you want. But since these problems are for practice purpose, you can stick with these significant digits. But when you are trying to code, you always make make sure that you are using double precision. Okay, always make sure you are using double precision in your MATLAB codes, or when you are writing your own program or something like that. Anyway, making use of this integration points and weights, you should be able to solve this assignment problem 1. And wherever limits of integrations are not from -1 to 1, you make it change the limits of integration. And problem 2, Gauss-Leguri, same thing. You need to go and see corresponding locations and the coordinates. This when I say coordinate, I mean this one. Coordinates of the points, depending on how many points you are selecting. What are the coordinates? What are the weights? You pick from here, and then solve this problem. This one. And this third one is Gaussian quadrature in 2 dimensions. Okay, we already discussed. And wherever limits of integrations are not from -1 to 1, change it before you select your integration points and weights and solve this problem. And fourth one is on a triangular domain. This is what I was saying. 0 to 1 minus t, 0 to 1. This represents the triangular domain. Integration of a triangular domain. This is how, these are the limits for one of the axes, along one of the axes. These are the limits along another axis. And if you are not convinced with this, we'll discuss further when we start looking at this 2-dimensional triangular elements. Okay. For the present, you can directly make use of whatever it is given in the supplied to you under numerical integration. You can use that and then solve that here. Integration points and weights for triangles. Any questions here? Any questions? And how to even do that integration? That formula is also given. You need to pick this weight and evaluate function at this point, and then multiply that weight and function evaluation. Depending on the number of points you select, you need to sum it up over that many number of points. So these are the advantages of numerical integration. So we are not, irrespective of whatever function here it is, we are just simply deciding the number of points, evaluating function at those points, multiplying with the weights, summing it up. And it's very easy to code, and especially if the function is like implicit function, and also even if function is not implicit, if it is complicated, then also this numerical integration, and also especially when you automate it by writing computer codes, numerical integration is the way to go forward. And about the fourth assignment, this one, 1 to 10 problems, they're all based on the truss, plane trusses as well as space trusses. So you should be able to solve with whatever we discussed. Okay, so you try to complete these 1 to 10 problems in assignment 4, or whether you are able to complete it or not, at least you have it go through this before your quiz exam on Saturday. And some of the units that are here in the problem, some of the for some of the problems, units are in FPS units. Okay, so it doesn't matter whatever units, as long as you maintain the consistency. So because these problems are taken from a source where the author is sitting in a country where they adopt FPS units. Okay. So any questions related, you don't need to you don't need to spend time in converting this into SI units. You can work in these units. You just maintain consistency in units. You should be able to solve the problem. Even if you try to convert, you may not get round figures. Okay, here it is 5-inch square. If you convert it to millimeters or centimeters, you will get decimal points and other things. Any questions here? Any questions? So if there are no questions, then, or if you have some questions later, you can bring it to my attention at a later stage as you keep solving these problems. Otherwise, let's proceed further. The next topic is beam bending. What is the beam? Beam is a structural member which carries a transverse load. Transverse load perpendicular to its axis. That is what is some structural element. If you want to classify it as a beam, that is what the criteria it needs to satisfy. Okay. Simple thing is no animal knows what we humans call it. Okay, dog don't know that it is being called with the name dog by humans, or cat don't know that it is being called as cat by humans. Based on certain characteristics, we say it is something, this animal or that animal. Similarly, beam doesn't mean something it should be horizontal and load should be applied in the vertical direction. It's not like that. A structural member which carries load transverse to its axis, or transverse load along its axis. So please make a note of it. This beam element can be inclined as well. This beam can be inclined. Okay, and you please take a note of this definition. And also please take a note of all the figures that are appearing in this slide. Please take a note of all the figures appearing in this slide, because whatever equations we are going to derive, finite element equations, all those equations, they have they are going to make sense only if you adopt this sign convention. If you adopt this sign convention only, they are going to make sense. And as I mentioned, you can use any sign convention and derive the equations and apply those and solve a problem. Finally, whatever you get are some numbers with a positive or negative sign appended to those numbers. So if it is positive, if you get a quantity which is positive, what actually that means, and if you get a negative quantity, what that actually means. That makes sense only if you adopts consistent sign convention. Okay, so consistent sign convention. If you adopt while learning or while adopting that procedure, then only they're going to make sense. Okay, so please take a note of this sign convention. This is a beam element, and for generality, this beam is shown like this. That means cross section need not be constant at every location along x-axis. Cross section can be varied. Okay, and also load is applied in the transverse direction. And the sign convention is x-axis is positive, positive going from left to right, going in this direction. X-axis is positive going from left to right, and y-axis is positive going from bottom to top. Y-axis is positive; it is going in the topward direction. So this is a sign convention for positive direction of x-axis, positive direction of y-axis. And here transverse load, you can see transverse load is shown as though it is acting in the upward direction. Because while deriving, I want to show load to be positive, load acting in the positive direction. In reality, load is going to be acting in the negative direction. Then you make Q or minus Q. Okay. So sign convention is all quantities acting in the upward direction are positive. All quantities acting towards the right direction are positive, related to these forces. And how to develop the Gowning differential equation for this beam element? We need to take a differential element. Here a differential element of length dx is taken. Transverse load is shown over that length. And rest of the things are coming from the equilibrium conditions. Or this is the free body diagram of an element of length dx taken out from this beam element. Okay, taken out from this beam element. This is the differential element, and you take a note of this because please, when I say take a note of it, you please immediately do that. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult for you. It's going to be confusing if you don't follow this sign convention. And after this, you can take a note of this one. Nodal degrees of freedom. Nodal degrees of freedom. What are nodal degrees of freedom? Here for a beam element, nodal degrees of freedom are going to be transverse displacement at each of the nodes as well as rotations at each of the nodes. So those are the nodal degrees of freedom. And what are the applied forces and moments? Applied forces are transverse forces. Applied moments are these kind of moments, clockwise or anti-clockwise moments. So this is a sign convention, positive. Please note that when I say sign convention, if the forces and moments or the nodal degrees of freedom are acting in the way that is shown in this figure, they are considered as positive. If they are acting in the opposite direction, they are negative. So that is what is meant by sign convention. So nodal degrees of freedom, applied forces and moments. The positive direction sign convention is indicated here. Please take a note of it, because I'm emphasizing again and again to take a note of it, because here itself this is the sign convention for applied forces and moments, whereas internal moments and internal shears. Internal shear is nothing but internal forces. Sign convention for internal moments and internal forces or shears is slightly different. That's why I'm saying you please take a note of it. And please note that this whatever the forces that are acting on this differential element of length dx, and q is the external load, that is external transverse load that is applied, whereas the rest of the quantities are internal quantities. If you take an element of length dx out of this beam, and that the element dx is in equilibrium because of these internal forces. So you can see, now you can see the direction in which these internal forces are indicated. They are matching with this. They are matching with the moments are considered to be positive. Moments are considered to be positive if they are acting in the clockwise direction at the left end and anti-clockwise direction at the right end. And the shear is internal shear, or shear is going to be considered as positive. It is acting in the upward direction at the left end and downward direction at the right end. Okay, so these two sign conventions are adopted here. So please take a note of this entire figure. Any questions here? And please note that sign convention is meant only for deriving the equations. We need to follow some convention to derive the equation. And if you don't like this, you can adopt whatever sign convention you want, but be consistent. At the end, you are going to get the same equations. Any questions? Any questions? So now we are going to write equilibrium equations for this equilibrium equation for this differential element. What equilibrium equations we are going to write? Sum of all forces acting in the vertical direction should be equal to 0. Sum of all moments taken about a point should be equal to 0. Okay. So let's write that sum of all forces acting in the vertical direction, because the forces are acting only in the vertical direction. There are no forces in the horizontal direction. If there are some forces in the horizontal direction, then sum of all forces equal to 0 in the horizontal direction. That condition also we are going to apply. Here, the first condition is sum of all forces acting in the vertical direction should be equal to 0. That means this V plus Qx multiplied by dx should be equal to V plus dV. Sum of all moments should be equal to 0, taken about any point. Let's take moments about this point. Sum of all moments about that point. M is going to result in clockwise moment. That is what is shown, the direction. V times dx. M plus V times dx. V acting in the upward direction at the left end. When I take moment about this point, about this corner, V is going to result in clockwise moment. So M plus V times dx should balance, and I am taking moment about this point. So this V plus dV is not going to give any moment, because lever arm is going to be 0, and other moment acting on this right side is M plus dm. So finally that equilibrium condition is going to result in M plus V times dx is equal to dm plus M plus dm. If you agree with this, these are the two equilibrium equations we are writing here. Sorry, I forgot one more moment. Moment due to this Q. Moment due to this Q is, I am taking moment about this point. Moment because of Q is going to be Q times dx, that is the load, resultant load, and it's going to act at the centroid of this region, that is dx divided by 2. So the moment that is going to result from Q is going to be Q times dx multiplied by dx divided by 2, and it's going to act in the clockwise direction. So when you take moment about this point, the total moment acting in the clockwise directions is m plus v times dx plus q times dx multiplied by dx divided by 2. And that should balance with m plus dm. So if you agree with this, this is what we get. Please take a note of these two equations. And dx is a small quantity. Dx is differential length of the differential element. So if a small quantity is there, if you take square of that, it's going to be still smaller. And if you are not convinced with it, let's say 0.1. And if you square 0.1, what you are going to get? That's going to be much smaller than 0.1. So if dx is small, dx square is going to be much smaller. So square of small quantities can be ignored, or neglecting the square of these small quantities, you can write this equation, and combining with this together, you can write like this. Okay, any questions? So please take a note of this equation. So what these equations are saying, derivative of your shear force. Derivative of shear force is going to be applied transverse load. Derivative of bending moment is going to be shear force. Derivative of shear force is equal to the applied load. Derivative of bending moment is equal to shear force. And together you can write like this. Okay? So this gives you a relationship between bending moment, shear force, and load applied. Transverse load that is applied. And here Q is not explicitly written in terms of x. It is actually Q as a function of x. Hope you have taken note of these equations. So let's move forward. Now, let's say this beam is being loaded with a transverse load. Okay, and if I take a small element, or if I take a segment on one side, after the load application and before the load application, and after the load application, a segment of that beam is shown here. Okay, and this is the original one. This gray color, whatever is shaded in gray, that is original. Let's assume that is original part of the beam, and after you applied the load, beam is going to undergo some deformation, and that deformed part of the beam is shown here. And please note that the original part of the beam and deformed part of the beam, they are shown here only to derive the equations, only to derive the relations between applied the displacements, and then rotations and strains and displacements. Okay. So please take a note of this figure. Please take a note of this figure, and please note that here this element, after application of load, it is shown as though it is going, getting displaced in the upward direction. Okay, it's an exaggeration. Okay, and you may not see this much, but for derivation purpose and other things, we are showing it like this to have an understanding what is going to happen. And also, this kind of thing may happen if Q is acting in the downward direction. But in our case, in the where we started out with, we are assuming Q to be acting in the upward direction. But it doesn't matter here. For deriving these relations, it doesn't matter whether Q is acting in the upward direction or downward direction. And for a while, forget about it. Let's assume Q to be acting in the downward direction. And at least for that case, you agree that beam is going to, or the original location, if it is like this, the deformed position can be represented like this. So please take a note of this. It is better you take a note in your notebook so that you can get a better feel for it. So this is the original neutral axis. And now let's focus on a point. Let's focus on a point which is at a distance. This let's say this is the center of the beam. Here, let's say that axis, or or it need not be. Okay, let's not say this is center of the beam or something like that, because the origin doesn't matter. So let's focus on a point which is at a distance, y from the neutral axis, which is at a distance in the positive direction of y, at a distance denoted with this y. Or you can say this point A is above the neutral axis. Above the neutral axis, a point which is at a distance y from the neutral axis. That is what I am focusing. This point, I am keeping a watch on this point before the load is applied and after the load is applied. After the application of load in the vertical direction, after the application of transverse load in the downward direction, this portion of the beam is going to get deformed in this manner. And the point which is at a distance above the neutral axis by a distance y, this point A is going to move to this point B. This point A is going to become this point B. Please note that there is some behavior associated with this. I'm taking, please see, I'm taking a plane, or I'm taking a section. I'm taking a section along the length of the beam. Okay. Originally, that section or that plane is, on that plane only this point A is chosen. That plane, which I am showing you here, is originally it is perpendicular to the neutral axis. This plane is perpendicular to the neutral axis, or this section is perpendicular to the neutral axis before application of load. And after application of load, this section is still going to be perpendicular to this load. This section is still going to be perpendicular to this, still going to be perpendicular to the neutral axis. This is the neutral axis in the deformed position. In the deformed configuration, this is the neutral axis. This section on which this point A is there, that is going to be this one. It is going to get rotated. It's going to get rotated because it has to maintain that section being perpendicular to the neutral axis, even in the deformed configuration. Okay. So this point A is going to move to point B, and also this plane on which this point B is lying is going to get rotated such a way that it is perpendicular to the neutral axis in the deformed configuration. So this point B, which is originally point A, it is moved both in the horizontal direction as well as in the vertical direction. But by how much it got moved in the horizontal direction, by how much it got moved in the vertical direction, they are indicated. U is the distance by which it got displaced in the horizontal direction. V is the distance by which it got displaced in the vertical direction. And this angle, the plane on which this point B is lying, that plane is going to remain perpendicular to the neutral axis in the, it's going to remain perpendicular to the neutral axis in the deformed configuration. That's what we are claiming. That's what we are claiming. Okay, let it be perpendicular to the neutral axis, even in the deformed configuration. So now let's understand how much this neutral axis is going to get rotated. How much this neutral axis is going to get rotated, because this, if you know how much this neutral axis is going to get rotated in the deformed configuration, by the same amount this plane also should get rotated, because they have to maintain 90 degrees. So that angle, the angle by which the neutral axis gets rotated in the deformed configuration, that is, if this point moves in the vertical direction by V, then the slope of that is going to give you the rotation. So if you agree with that, the same angle is going to be here. Okay. So with all this discussion, we can easily write U displacement in the vertical direction, and please note that displacement in the vertical direction is happening in the negative x direction. This point A is getting displaced to point B in the during that process. It is moving by a distance U in the negative x direction. So that's why negative symbol is appended. And then since this neutral axis in the deformed configuration got rotated by this dv over dx, this plane also is going to get rotated by the same amount, because this plane has to maintain that perpendicular condition with respect to the neutral axis. So this rotation is also dv over dx. If this rotation is dv over dx, so this point is this point originally, which is at a distance y from the neutral axis, still is going to remain at a distance y from the neutral axis. That is this B point. So the distance of this B point from this neutral axis is going to be y, and it got rotated. This point B, or the plane on which this point B is resting, it got rotated by dv over dx. So the displacement u is given by y times dv over dx. That is the magnitude, and it is moving in the negative x direction. That's why negative sign. And this can be compactly written like this. And if you refer any standard mechanics of materials book, when you are studying your strength of materials, all these are actually the entire derivation you will find in those books. And whatever I'm discussing here, it's not something new. You must have already studied. If you have not studied it, better you go back to your mechanics of material, revise it. And same thing I am actually recapping. It's not anything advanced concept or anything like that. Whatever I just mentioned, this the plane or section over this point, over which this point A is lying, that section is going to remain perpendicular to the neutral axis even in the deformed configuration. That also is one of the assumptions that is made in theory of simple bending. In theory of simple bending, one of the important assumptions that is made is plane sections remain plane before and after bending. Plane sections remain plane before and after bending. That is under theory of simple bending. In reality, in real beam, it may not happen. Please note that some theory is going to be developed by making some assumptions. So in that pure bending, that is what is pure bending. Okay, under pure bending case, that means we are assuming there is no shear force in this region. Under pure bending case, plane sections remain plane before and after bending. Okay, so that is what we are assuming. But in reality, shear is going to be there. That means plane section, this section over which this point A is lying, in the original configuration it may be at 90 degrees perpendicular, but in the deformed configuration it won't be. So that assumption is not valid, or as long as shear is very much negligible, that assumption is valid. Okay. And if you say I want to bring in that, like, no, I don't want to, I want to relax that assumption, then you need to go and consider that. But that is applicable for a different case, as long as the deformation of the beams are small, because we are focusing on small deformations. Okay, under small deformations, that assumption, even if you violate it, even if that assumption violates the reality, doesn't the result that you get is not going to make much difference in accuracy. And also, as long as the beams are thin beams or slender beams, that assumption is valid. And as the depth of the beam increases, then that assumption is not valid. So in that case, you need to include that. There, you need to include shear deformation. That is a different issue. Okay. So as a part of learning process, we are going to proceed step by step. In the first step, we assume shear deformations are negligible. So you need to keep that in mind. This equation is valid. This equation is valid only if shear deformations are neglected. If shear deformations are not neglected, then there is going to be some correction to this. That you need to keep in mind. Okay? Don't think or don't be of impression that if you understood this, you understood everything in beams. It's not like that. So the major assumption is shear deformations are neglected. And we are assuming plane sections that are perpendicular to the neutral axis, or sections which are perpendicular to the neutral axis originally remains perpendicular to the neutral axis in the deformed configuration. Okay, so I hope that is clear. If it is not clear, please think about it. We will discuss further if you have any questions. So if this is the relationship between the horizontal displacement and the rotation. So now I got this displacement. If I got the displacement here, I should be able to calculate strain corresponding to that displacement u. How do I get strain? Derivative of displacement is going to be strain. So based on that, I can write this equation. And applying Hooke's law, you can write the last equation. Okay, any questions here? So I got the displacement in the horizontal direction, strain that is developed because of the displacement, and stress that is developed because of the displacement. And please note that this strain is going to act in the x direction. That that means it's a normal strain. It's normal. If you take any section, it's going to act normal to that. Suppose if I take this beam, if I take a section, and that strain is going to act in the normal direction to that section, and this is normal force on that section. And please see this. This is normal stress on that section. And please see this stress. It is minus E. E is the material property. And Y is Y is the location of the point that you are looking at with respect to the neutral axis. So for some points, the points above the neutral axis, Y is going to be positive. For points below the neutral axis, Y is going to be negative. Okay? So Y is going to be positive for points above the neutral axis. Y is going to be negative for points below the neutral axis. For points above the neutral axis, you see, and this is nothing but curvature. This is nothing but curvature. You are taking rotation. Slope of rotation is curvature. If you take this is transverse displacement. Derivative of transverse displacement is rotation, and derivative of rotation is curvature. And now stress is given by this with a negative sign appended here. And let's understand what is this. Now we are assuming originally the beam section is this, and deformed configuration it became like this. And if I take a section, stress at any point above the neutral axis, is going to act. It's going to be given by this value. Epsilon is equal. Sigma is equal to minus E times Y times second derivative of transverse displacement. Okay, negative sign I want to emphasize. What do you mean by negative sign? This is positive direction of x-axis. So stress is going to act in the opposite direction. Stress is going to act from right to left for all points above the neutral axis, and for all points below the neutral axis, stress is going to act from left to right. And if you integrate this stress over that area over which it is acting, if you integrate this stress over the area it is acting, it's going to give you force. And if you integrate this stress by multiplying, or if you take the moment of this stress, over the entire cross section, it's going to give you moment. So let's take that. So if you take integration of this, what do you mean by integration? You multiply this, the lever arm, the distance of that point, any point from the neutral axis. This is the stress value. Distance of that point from the neutral axis is y. It's y. So you need to multiply stress with lever arm. You get the moment, integrate over the problem domain. Integrate over the problem domain. Okay. So stress multiplied by lever arm integrated over this, that's a cross section. Whatever I have shown you, it is in the side view. If you take a section of it, for generality, let's assume this is how that section looks like. So moment is given by stress times distance of the particular point above the neutral axis. You integrate over the problem domain. And this gives you relationship between moment and stress, or moment and curvature. This is nothing but moment curvature relation. This is going to be moment curvature relation. Okay. Any questions here? So you got the relationship between, first you developed the relationship between shear force, apply transverse load, moment and apply, or the relationship between moment and shear. You have noted this equation. Just now we derived the relationship between moment and the curvature. Moment and the curvature. Okay. And that is going to be this one. You apply that relation. Now you got a relationship between moment and curvature. You get this one. And if you have this, you can write this equation. This is the governing differential equation for a beam element. Beam element under small deformations. Because we are assuming plane sections, plane and sections which are plane before bending are going to remain plane after bending. And this is a fourth order differential equation. So 4 boundary conditions are required to solve this. And now apply whatever thumb rule that you studied earlier. If the boundary value problem is is of order 2p, those boundary conditions of order 0 to p minus 1 are essential. Those boundary conditions from p to 2p minus 1 are natural boundary conditions. So transverse, and here, since this is a beam problem, those boundary conditions are going to make physical sense for you. So physically, the boundary conditions are, first one is transverse displacement, rotation. Those are the essential boundary conditions. And what about those boundary conditions of order p to 2p minus 1? What is p? Here the order differential equation is 4. So p is 2. So those boundary conditions of order 2 and 3 are natural boundary conditions. 2 is nothing but your moment, and 3 is nothing but your shear force. Okay. So in tomorrow's class, we are going to start with this differential equation, and we are going to derive the finite element equations for this beam element. Okay. So what I suggest is, if something, whatever I covered in today's class, that you are supposed to already have that knowledge from your earlier classes. If whatever I discussed in today's class, if you feel that something you have not understood, you revise your mechanics of materials, go to theory of bending and see the equation derivation and how this equation is obtained. You please go through that and convince yourself. Okay. So we'll continue in tomorrow's class. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.